A very warm welcome to Art Gallery Explorer with me, George Dopamine, coming up. Yes, welcome art lovers to the vlog that takes you inside art galleries and exhibition spaces across London, the southeast of England and beyond. Today I've made it down to the beautiful Kent coast, to Margate, to explore a show at Turner Contemporary by Scottish-born artist Anya Gallaccio. She's now 61. She was part of that YBA generation that grew out of Goldsmiths College, but her art is so interesting. Produces ephemeral work, sculptural work, which includes flowers and apples. These works change as they are displayed in the gallery. I'm here on the 28th of September, the very first day that this exhibition opens, but I'm very much prepared if I come back to see it develop and change as apples rot, flowers biodegrade, and many of the other materials that she uses change the very nature of her work. In lots of ways, she's an antidote to that very masculine man controlling material, producing great work of art which stays forever in a gallery or somebody's house. She's somebody who's very much about that working with and communing with the materials that she uses. The last time I saw one of her works was in that Tate rehang last year at Tate Britain, where her work, Preserved Beauty, using flowers, was on display, and we were all able to watch as it changed. This is a survey, a retrospective of sorts. Gallaccio's 61. She's kind of on a career high. She won the competition to design the permanent National AIDS Memorial in London, and so I really can't wait to come into this show. Come and join me as we head inside. Gallaccio's been working with trees since the 1990s, and this example is cast in bronze with porcelain apples reaching upwards as if they're reaching for the sun. The branches and twigs are direct casts, meaning that they can only be used once as the wood burns away during the process. And Gallaccio has said in the exhibition, bronze is a mere material that holds unquestionable authority within the hierarchy of art production, but my approach to working with bronze and the objects I've chosen to cast undermine this authority. For me, bronze is soft and pliable, and my works in bronze have a fragility that belies its reputation. The candles here in the Dolce Vita are lit every day by gallery assistants, and over time a mound of wax is going to build up on this piece, so it's going to look really spectacular. And in the exhibition, Gallaccio has described her use of candles as an attempt to be more expressive. Pollock insisted on being in complete control of the gesture, which is the antithesis of my approach. On to say, with the candles and the flowers which you can see here, there's no definite end. The pieces can go through many manifestations of success and failure in terms of pictorial or compositional concerns. This work, Preserved Beauty, is one of Gallaccio's most famous, and it's composed of over 2,000 red gibberella flowers, which are going to gradually decompose over the course of the exhibition. Gallaccio has remarked that her flower work can be kept in their decomposed state until they petrify or turn to dust, or they can be recreated to start the whole process again and again. And I think that this cyclical theme of loss and rebirth, whether it with the candles in the Dolce Vita or the flowers in this work, are a really important part of Gallaccio's practice. I do apologise, by the way, for the red, the reflections on the red here. You have to see these for yourselves, although by the time you see them, they would not be looking as spectacular as this, but probably more interesting. This work is really easy to walk past because it's just at the side of the gallery that is by the Preserved Beauty work, and it's direct cast bronze Brussels sprouts. And this is part of a series where Gallaccio is attempting to produce more permanent works, I suppose, as a kind of legacy. even more spectacular is Falling from Grace, which sees 2,700 gala apples form a curtain in the gallery. These apples were collected at the height of the autumn harvest, but rejected because they were too big for the supermarket's demands for human consumption. And obviously, apples are hugely symbolic within the Bible and within our culture, but they're also seen as quintessentially British. And yet, the exhibition makes the point that they were introduced here by the Romans, having made their way along the Silk Road from Kazakhstan. At the end of the exhibition, these apples will be pulped and the seeds will be collected and used to plant a crabapple hedge around Gallaccio's orchard at Lees Court in Kent. And the orchard is envisaged as both a living, evolving artwork and an outdoor classroom for the future. The pulped apples, by the way, will be composted for the Turner Contemporary staff garden. And I can imagine as these apples rot and decompost, the smell and the sight is going to change hugely. I really want to come back to see this work as it evolves. As with a lot of Gallaccio's work, there is an emphasis on the cyclical nature of birth and death and rebirth. And these ceramic forms were salvaged from a large unfired clay sculpture entitled Beautiful Minds, which was destroyed after it was produced by a 3D printer during an exhibition in 2017. More on 3D printers later. And they were the clay fragments that were left were dipped in earth slips, ash, and salt, then wood fired in Scotland. And they are pushing the materials to the limits with unpredictable results and colours, according to the exhibition, on the surface of these forms. Although I have to say, these were some of the less attractive and successful works for me in the exhibition. And you might remember the bronze Brussels sprouts that we've just seen. We see some more smaller bronze casts of Jerusalem artichokes as well. The inner space within contains the crown of a 107-year-old ash tree that was felled due to the devastating effects of ash dieback disease, and it's been reassembled here. It's obviously quite a surprise to see such a big sculpture in the gallery. And it's quite clear that it's been reassembled by human hands. So even as you're contemplating the shape of the branches and the trunk, you're kind of also forced to contemplate something Gallaccio wants us to, which is humans' intervention in nature. Obviously, apples are a cultivated crop as well. Interestingly, Gallaccio also wants us to consider the spaces between the branches. She wants us to admire the tree, but also, as you can see here, the empty space or the concept of negative space almost. And once this tree leaves Turner Contemporary at the end of its run, it will be returned back to Lees Court Estate in Faversham, where it was felled and turned into a natural habitat. There's a series of earth and mineral drawings where Gallaccio makes drawings using a traditional marbling process, which you can see here, with pigment she grinds from collected pieces of earth and material. And this was very much influenced with her move from London to California, where she was confronted with a very different landscape to what she'd been used for before. And it also connected her with the legacies of the land art movement in America and minimalism. And these were abstract drawings, but they're made from earth, sand, and rocks gathered from places where she lived and visited. And so, in some ways, they're a very personal documentation of the landscapes that she's existed in. Now, this work, Beautiful Minds Den Hole, obviously on the first day of filming, was relatively unspectacular. But by the end of the run, this live 3D printer will be extruding a mixture of chalk and porcelain to gradually build a sculpture, which is a scaled down version of a den hole, which I have to confess I'd never heard of, which is a deep underground chalk chamber. They're prevalent in Kent and they were hand excavated and accessed using a narrow vertical shaft. and hopefully you've got from this whole exhibition, there's a tremendous commitment from the artist, from Gallaccio, to the local landscape. The fact that this exhibition, the first big survey of her work in the UK, is happening in Kent, means that lots of the works which have already existed in other places have been reprised with a very Kentish focus. And these black and white works, which you're seeing here, for example, are all entitled Margate 2024, and they bring aspects of the local landscape, including mussels and sand, into some what I've found surprisingly beautiful works on paper. Um, Gallaccio is also an activist artist, and one of the big legacies of this exhibition is going to be planting of an orchard in Kent, which is going to leave trees which will be producing apples hopefully for the next 50 to 100 years. And it would also provide an educational space where generations of school children from Kent can hopefully go to learn. There's a really powerful environmental message to this show. The first or maybe last work that you see makes use of the spectacular floor-to-ceiling gallery which overlooks the North Sea. And this work, I will walk down to the end with you if you will come all the way down with me. It was originally created in 2007, but it's now been expanded for the exhibition and now comprises of 130 meters of hop twine. And it was actually produced collectively at Gallaccio's studio in London and the Crate Studios in Margate. And it's obviously a very Kentish material used by farmers and gardeners to support the growth of hot plants and vegetables. And we're encouraged to have a look at the grid structure, the handmade qualities, the repetition, but also links to the North Sea. Obviously, it evokes fishing nets, as well as the annual tradition of hop picking in rural Kent, which begins every September. I really hope that gave you a sense and a Gallaccio show from Turner Contemporary. I must add the caveat that obviously what I brought you was filmed on the very first day the show opened, the 28th of September. It's now October by the time I'm posting this, and these works will have already changed. It's quite strange showing that way, isn't it? Because yesterday I filmed the Francis Bacon show, for example, and what you see is what you would get if you go, but with this it's not. And so with that in mind, I must try to get back, hopefully sort of late December, early January, to capture how the apples have rotted, the flowers have biodegraded, the candles in La Dolce Vita have created a mound of wax, and to see how it impacts on the works. And in the meantime, if you go down to Margate, if you're a Gallaccio fan or you're interested, please do post in the comments what we can expect, what's changing, how the smell's changing, for example, because it was very, very fresh smelling and when I went down there, and that's a large part of the art. I do think Gallaccio is an underrated ex-member of the YBA movement that came out of Goldsmiths in the 1980s. Unlike some of her more well-known contemporaries, I think the nature of her work and the fact that it often is not able to be seen definitely has added to that, as has the fact she was in the United States for quite a while teaching in California. And so it's great that this survey / kind of retrospective rectifies that with Gallaccio at the age of 61. For me, the highlight was the Dolce Vita, Falling from Grace, the work with a curtain of apples, Preserved Beauty, which we've seen quite recently at Tate Britain, and an interesting new work, which is producing a chalk den hole, I think you pronounce it, from a 3D printer, and that is going to become massive as the exhibition goes on. These works show her signature style of working with materials, of working with the landscape as well. And there's very much a link to Kent in this show. In the apples come from there, for example. The tree that's been felled because of ash dieback also comes from Kent as well. And so there's a real attempt by Gallaccio to link to the local landscape and the Kentish landscape. And you also see that with the chalk piece on the printer. There's There's a couple of things I'd love to have seen of two of her most famous works, Waterloo, where she poured molten lead onto the gallery floor and had to be rushed to hospital, by the way, with third-degree burns. Obviously couldn't be here. It would have been too difficult to recreate that work. That was actually the one that was in Freeze, the 1988 show, which kind of launched the YBAs. And also, I'd have really liked to have seen Intensities and Surfaces. That's her work made up of blocks of ice, which melts as the exhibition goes on. But I could understand why that would be impractical and too heavy as well. It's interesting, in the show, Gallaccio says that she started making permanent works because she was aware that so many of her works don't last. And I thought that some of these permanent works were really lovely. I thought the little bronzes of things like Jerusalem artichokes and sprouting potatoes really captivated me. They were unusual shapes and really interesting. I didn't think that First There Was a Mountain, this range of sculptures worked as well aesthetically, but I did really enjoy the works relating to Margate and the Margate mussels. These works that you can see here, aesthetically I like them, and they are the kind of works that will last. But generally for me, she is an installation sculptor who produces works that last for the duration of the show. They change. She's a really refreshing antidote to that kind of artistic control of materials, and so for that reason I enjoyed it. Yeah, and so it's a really special opportunity, and I hope by documenting it at the start, and then hopefully if the stars align, going back and documenting it at the end as well, I'll be able to capture the works that are ephemeral, that disappear, so that they can stay on the internet and be enjoyed for art lovers to come as well, and for those of you who can't get down to the show. It's a free show, which is such good value. I mean, Margate's a great art day out. There's the Carl Freeman Gallery as well, which he moved down from London, and loads of independent galleries which had a good nosy round. And it's on until the 26th of January. So if you're able to get down to Margate and you like what you saw, do get down there, have a cup of tea in the gallery to support the gallery, or give a donation as well. The next show that coming up is the big Francis Bacon show from the National Portrait Gallery, so do stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this show, you might want to check out my Damien Hirst blog. I'm going to put a link here, another member of the YBA and a contemporary of Gallaccio's. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching. It always means a huge amount supporting the channel.